trust is no longer just, you got to have it. It's the anchor of success in branding and marketing, in your overall image as a company, and ultimately your bottom line.
Welcome to Brand on the Rocks, the podcast that distills bold ideas into clear messages you can actually use. Each week, we serve up conversations, audits, and straight pours of insight to help you cut through the noise and grow your business. Hosted by brand strategist Ryan Holk, this is where clarity comes neat and your brand gets remembered. Welcome to Brand on the Rocks. Today, I have a guest, Gal Borenstein, the CEO of the Borenstein Group and a leading expert in digital branding. For over 30 years, he's been the strategic mind behind some of the biggest names in tech, defense, and aerospace, helping them to build brands that people actually trust. He's a best-selling author, a leading voice on how to stay human-centered in an AI-driven world. And today, we're going to chat about trust in the digital age. Gal, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is great to have you here today. So I'm curious, trust is a big issue that I see a lot of business leaders struggling with that I'm working with. So tell me, how in your mind is that becoming a crucial differentiator today?
I think there are two components to it. Number one is the fact that we're talking about trust is because there is an erosion of trust that it permeates across the global community of business. But if we want to focus on the United States, it really kind of is an evolving event or a transaction that started by being very transactional, if you will, to, one product, for example, or one service that may not be as reliable. But suddenly, when you added the digital age and you add artificial intelligence to it, what winds up happening, it is changing kind of the entire approach that brands are able to survive or fail. And between the erosion of trust between consumers and brands, the second thing that's happening, especially to management and culture of companies, is we are basically in that cliche mode, but we used to be able to hide it within the company and just own our narrative. But in reality, what's going on now is you're no longer alone. So whatever you say about your company or a promise that you make about your company, when it goes out to the ether or to the marketplace, what winds up happening is your digital footprint includes your social media, for example. So there's a lot of fake reviews. There's a lot of fake detractors. There are actual news that go from, we just want to hide it within the company because it's just a small PR problem. But lo and behold, when it goes out, reporters report about your company and suddenly you are on defense. Those are the two issues that are permeating both the erosion of trust and the fact that in the digital age, trust is no longer just a value. It is something that you can monetize and literally measure whether companies are going to be successful or not.
Okay, so you can monetize trust. And I understand that intuitively because I see the people who are failing to do it struggling to monetize. What does that look like? The idea of I've got to earn it or I've got to find a way to monetize it, just like practically.
Well, I'd like to kind of use an example that's been in the news for the past 2 years. A little company called Boeing that is the number one manufacturer in the world. Certainly, they've been around and had a solid brand, but suddenly when they were investigated for mechanical failure in one plane, it followed with an investigation of quality assurance. And at the end of the day, they found a lot of safety regulations that were not followed in the vein of trying to kind of get more money and more margin out of each service. There were people that didn't care that worked there. There were people that cared a lot but didn't report it. And when the news came out about one plane, suddenly it came out about other planes too that were investigated. And the result of it was Boeing was associated with the brand of safety, with the brand of quality assurance being number one. Safety is first. And suddenly, as that event of being challenged by failures of the system, they're not just failures of the system, they're failure of management. They're failures of more than just the marketing department. And suddenly you become in a react mode. So what's really important is to understand that the brand promise that the company makes is not just the advertising department or the marketing department. It's
Mm.
the entire kind of culture of the company and making sure that the promises that you make are believable and achievable by your own employees, by your own small business, by big business, middle business. It doesn't really matter. What matters is you have to be able to understand that if you don't have the follow through and you just say, for example, we're great for the environment, we're great for quality assurance, safety first, like the example that I just gave. And then you go out to the marketplace and you have disgruntled employees go on Glassdoor, for example, and write all the promises that they make to me. They're just false. Make me work overtime. They don't pay for it, even though they told me that they will. They fired 200 of my friends with an email and denied access to
Mm.
my cubicle. All these different things are part of kind of a new enterprise, if you think about it, or an ecosystem
Mm-hmm.
where when I say trust is monetized, imagine because of the loss of trust, when the quality assurance issue came with Boeing, for example, it lost them billions of dollars in orders and back orders, and they had to stop at some point and literally lose money
Mm.
in order to kind of ensure that the promise that they're making is actually going to follow through. And it's still not done. It's still almost like 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And with all the budget that a company like that has, you would think that it will grow a lot faster. But because now there's government regulators, OSHA, Transportation Administration, all these different things that have to go into making sure that the trust can be restored, that if you buy this plane,
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to crash because it's missing a part.
Right.
Now, most people look at it and say, that's an internal thing. What is that connected to your outside brand? That's my point. It
Mm.
is directly connected to your outside brand because you actually carry your internal failure, which can be corrected or acknowledged. And then promise things that's going to be the fastest, the most robust airplane in the world, and it's better than, let's say, a competitor like Airbus, which is number two
Mm-hmm.
in the world. So that's kind of one example. Another example of monetizing trust is, for example, let's me kind of focus on Facebook. We know Facebook and we've been using it for, I believe, over a decade now. And I think most of us think about it as a kind of community where you kind of have friends, you have friends of friends, and you see different reels that are typically authentic, pictures of your kids connecting with people from your college, right? It's kind of a safe community where you have information. But about 2 years ago, and it's still going on today, Facebook suddenly became the company that was associated with lack of trust about data integrity and data safety,
Mm-hmm.
and finding out that they're selling data to third party vendors where it has your private information. And the biggest visual was, and I think if you've been on Facebook for more than an hour a day, you've probably seen one of your friends having a paragraph that basically says, I do not give consent to Facebook for using my image or my
Yep.
words in any advertisement. And at the beginning, it looked like a joke. They said, cut and paste it into your feed, if you will. But in reality, what it represented was a complete breakdown of trust
Mm.
between Facebook being kind of that safe community where you pick who you want to be involved with, to now you're not even sure that your information is following governance of privacy because it's just really a company that owns its own money. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a governmental organization. So you could say free speech, you could say a lot of different things, but they lost a lot of advertising revenue for a very long time because that trust was basically eroding with their end consumers. And then
Mm.
as a result, they lost trust that could been monetized for advertising revenues is
Yeah.
actual revenue.
So both of those examples, and those are stellar examples in very different spaces, but they both seem to represent something that I've experienced, and that is that the internal culture of the organization is going to, at some level, be seen externally, whether you believe it or not.
Correct.
And that the tension then is to figure out, and I think you said it already, not just how do we hide it, but how do we lean into it and fix the culture. I think the only way Boeing's going to be fixed is not to fix the external, it's going to be to fix the internal. I personally don't have a lot of faith in Facebook figuring it out because I think they're chasing ad dollars rather than people. That's just my take. But with the acceleration now of AI content taking over, and we talked just briefly even before we hit record about one AI tool that you've been using. But with that, like I saw a conversation yesterday online and a person's response was, I'm pretty sure this is AI because it reads too nicely to have been written by a human. That the AI was getting so clean, so perfect in its sentence structure and connective tissue that you read it and went, this sounds like you, but it sounds a little better than you. So that's an interesting thing that I think we're building right now is with that culture and the push towards AI. And I don't think we're getting away from AI. I think it's going to be our life. But with it accelerating, especially content for all these businesses, are we at a risk of creating more noise and breaking that trust even further? Or how do we find balance there?
As I kind of researched kind of case studies and interviewed CEOs of companies and CGOs or directors of business development, I found that most people in corporate America, and in small business in particular, have two kind of values or situations that they're dealing with. One is the FOMO factor, which is if I don't incorporate AI into my business, I'm going to be left behind. I'm going to be Mr. Irrelevant, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side, people are rushing to implement AI into every part of their business through what we call agentic AI because they feel that it will be more productive. And the answer is AI is a robot. AI is not your brand. AI does not live your values, which are not the trite 3 or 4 things that every company says. We're innovative. We're customer service oriented. We deliver for you, right? UPS. Whatever it is, AI can basically take what you're giving it and then create something that is personalized, but yet robotically missing all the things that a human being and a human interaction would have. So what that creates is a situation where, for example, if you're doing kind of a direct email campaign, and now with the specialty of having an agent that can send 100,000 emails instead of 10,000 emails. In your small business, maybe your current customers with 100, but you do it instantly, you can track it. That's all great. But if you're not really kind of bringing the human condition, the human emotions into AI, what AI will do, it will replicate the success of the metric, if you will, of how many people were we able to convert or engagement. Yet at the same time, you're going to be then replicating the mistakes that you made in the speed of math. And that's huge because AI right now, and obviously it's going to be evolving, but right now everybody's excited that they can get the engagement level, how many people like open the virtual envelope, if you will. But it does not parlay itself into, okay, can you follow up with 1,000 people that responded and said that they want to engage? Do you have the ability to go beyond the ICP, if you will, the perfect personality that you want to pursue? All these things are being fed into a machine, and the machine cannot have emotions. It will take what you give it and then run really fast with it. I'm not saying that AI is dumb. It's just not capable of having emotions. If you ask it a question with emotion, it will just tell you the process of achieving the goal, which is kind of a process of logic. There is no logic when it comes to branding. Branding is not about logic. It's about what people like. For example, about going to Starbucks and having, a lounge where you can sit and talk to friends, read newspapers, right? Which is kind of the ambiance. And the ambiance is not something that AI can emulate for you. So if you think about it in those terms, what people need to do. And again, big companies are going big because it's a kind of part of the perception of who they are. So if their brand is about innovation and you don't incorporate AI, that's one thing. But for the small business community out there, do not rush into it without having index what it is that you're trying to accomplish that will increase the engagement in the
Mm,
manner that your brand values are consistent with it. And I think that's really where there's a complete disconnect. And that's why we see so many failure.
mhm,
And yes, there's the saying, fail often, fail fast,
mhm,
but you can't afford it if you're a small business owner and you hired an AI agent company to program something for you and not having any follow up. So
mm,
I highly recommend thinking about your company as a human being, as a not just as a persona, but as a human being that has failures and has successes, and apply what you want to communicate to the outside world in a manner that is consistent with your heart and your soul. Because if the company does not have a heart and a soul that people believe in, let's go to Volvo, safe for a car, right?
mhm,
It's still around because people believe that it will be safer than other cars. It might not be the most popular car anymore because it doesn't have the latest Apple car display or something like that, but it attracts a very specific
mhm.
type of audience. And naturally, with the digital revolution, we produce videos right now. And going back to the point that I made about Facebook and think about products and service that you're basically communicating and try to advertise to your audience. And let's say that you have the perfect audience, whether it's on Google or Facebook platform. And here's what happens. You say, I want to create an ad or a kind of a short commercial with maybe an influencer or maybe just basically talking through AI to show imagery. And then there's a kind of an avatar. There's an attractive person
Mhm,
that looks real. And then they sing to you, they talk to you. And what happens? As soon as you find out and realize this is not legitimate or is not really kind of a real person, all the trust that you had in the brand goes to hell in a handbasket.
mm,
And to give you a very recent example, last year for the Super Bowl, Coca-Cola, that always had the Coca-Cola Bears as a staple of who they are, happened to be one of the first companies to use AI to create a much more engaging video. But they did not acknowledge that they used AI. And as soon as basically people saw that it was AI, the human connection,
mm,
the brand was attacked. And instead of being part of kind of the integral part of what the
mhm,
brand is, what happened was the opposite. People were complaining that Coca-Cola is not authentic anymore, that it's not transparent anymore, that is not really have a touch on the pulse of
mm,
what the audience is looking for. And that's again, trust monetized in the
mhm.
form of loss. They did replace it fairly fast, which was the right thing to do, but it's out there. And now think about every brand that is using AI to, for example, create a video and use influencers, influencers that are bots
Mhm.
becoming the main spokespeople for brands. You got to be careful because if you basically go into that route and your consumers or your customers or your clients, depending on the industry, you find yourself wondering if it's real. If you're just asking the question if it's real, you got a problem.
Yeah.
You got the problem of trust. And that's what trust is no longer just you got to have it. It's the anchor of success in branding and marketing in your overall image as a company and ultimately your bottom line, because your bottom line comes and can be traced all the way back to what promise you made and what
Mhm.
really happened and how you represented your brand in the marketplace.
So you brought an interesting filter there, and it's something that I don't see a lot of people warning against, and that is that AI essentially has its place, but at the end of the day, you have to be audience aware. It's all got to be in the context of the audience. Because there's times when I watch an AI clip and I think, well, that's cute. But there's other brands that I've been watching and I'm going, they don't have a single real person. on this brand. It's one thing if it's a photo because then it feels like it's a photo shoot. It's another thing if it's a talking head, some sort of single person's point of view telling you something that's supposed to be important. And I'd never consciously thought, oh, I dropped trust there as much as I've gone, yeah, it just doesn't feel authentic. And I guess that really is the trust factor, which is so powerful. So for the brands who are trying to figure out, we know we need the tools. We're never going to have a chance in this economy without the tools. Do you have some sort of filter or set of questions or process that you help them kind of think differently, like when you're going to use it, here's things to ask or here's things to consider, so that they don't fall into that slippery slope of like what Coke just did?
Absolutely. In my book, Don't Believe the Hype, When Trust is on the Line, which is on Amazon, I really kind of developed a framework of
Mm,
thinking for people that I call Guardian. Interesting name, right? For
yeah.
trust. And the Guardian really kind of allows every company in any situation to adjust itself. But the core of it is, how are you accounting and benchmarking trust as an index when it comes to your company culture, and how does it look on the outside? So think about it, what you're doing inside of the company in trust, in transparency, in collaboration, in measuring interaction and believability. And then you go to the outside and you do the same thing. And you start simply by benchmarking from 0 to 10, the top 5 things that you care about the most that represent the real promise of the organization. And you don't need to spend a lot of money on it. It's just basically putting your priorities, and stop thinking about just the advertising part, because advertising is all about getting attention and sometimes it accentuating like 1%
Mhm.
from a 99% of a promise that you make.
Yeah.
That's great. That's the creative part. That's the part that we all like when we see an ad that for jeans, but it doesn't show jeans, for example, right? But if you don't know your audience, if you don't actually interview and focus group, and now it's much
Mm,
easier to focus group because you can do it online. Geography is no longer an issue. And what you can do is really make sure that the authenticity is there. And it might start at a 3, but after you kind of fix the things that you do and you confirm it with your kind of target customers, think about it as beta, if you will, you have a much higher chance of being successful. So the Guardian framework that I created for building trust is about how do you not just make promises, but making sure that the promises that you're making are really kind of living values within the company, and then are acceptable and believable to the outside world before you made your first shot, if you will, versus just lock and load, run the ads and basically test them and ruin some of your brand trust simply because you didn't ask this question, you didn't get feedback. You just want to be faster to market. So the most important thing that the Guardian framework to build trust is about resilience. Things happen.
mm,
Companies, small companies have crisis communications because events take over. It could be in the form of, for example, financial downfall of a company. Thousands of people get laid off because the stock market decided that today is the day for that stock
mhm.
to tank. And you don't control that, right? My answer is you do control it, because your way of being vulnerable and being accountable to the marketplace and making sure that you take care of your employees by letting them know that this is coming ahead of time, not at the same time that they're reading it on Wall Street Journal or some Yahoo investment group online. That is really the
Mm,
difference. Companies that use that are able to have a protocol. So this is the time when you build that framework, is to have kind of a category of, let's imagine the worst disasters that can happen to our brand when it's outside. I think back a few years ago for the younger audience that may not remember. Do you remember the trust issue with Tylenol,
oh, yeah.
when there was a criminal or a criminal gang that basically refilled Tylenol, opened bottles because there was no seal then, and it was made to believe that Tylenol was not safe. Now, in reality, there were recalls by the FDA, by the CDC, but it didn't really matter whether Tylenol works or it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't. So there was a fast reaction in the marketplace, and suddenly people said, well, I don't trust Tylenol. And then Tylenol, over a period of, I think,
Mm-hmm.
a few months, said, we're going to change our supply chain and put seals so people can believe that what they're getting inside is true and is trusted, because you're talking about medications. You're talking about things that can kill people or make them better or relieve or alleviate symptoms. The issue here, if you don't have a protocol for what are the disasters that can happen in your business and how do you communicate it internally and externally, because we no longer live in a world where you can keep secrets inside your company. Even if when you're private, you can't, because your employees have a footprint. We all have a digital footprint. We can go to Google search engine that is now integrated with Google AI called Gemini, for example. And if you basically put a line like, is this company
Mm-hmm.
legit? In the past, you just got a bunch of links to articles and you had to kind of go 3 levels down of clicking. Now, generative AI through Google will tell you, we assembled like 100 sources of information. We looked at Trustpilot reviews, and this company is legit. And many other times, because you did not take the time to build your generative AI and SEO, and which is called now GEO, which is generative search engine optimization, that's really where your brand might die. So part of the idea is, don't get stuck in the past. Make sure that what you are communicating to the outside is basically matching your digital footprint. And your digital footprint means there are things that you control, like your website. There are things that you can control, like your social media, in terms of what you're saying to the outside world. But if you don't listen and you don't go to where people are looking for information, then you're wasting a lot of time and energy that will have to be retrieved or earned back, which again goes back to trust is actually a coin. It costs money. And I think Warren Buffett was the one that said, and I may be paraphrasing them, but he said about reputation, that it takes like a day or 90 minutes, whatever the term was, to lose your reputation. And it takes a lifetime to keep your reputation. So that really is the core of why you can't believe what people are telling you anymore. You have to prove it. And there are tools to do that, which is generative AI, and really looking at the search engines and what AI brings to the table is telling your story consistently, providing social proof points that allow people to look you up without ever calling you and have a very good impression of you because you've done the homework. That's what it's about.
Your example there is really close to home because I typed in a person's name and said, is this person legit, in the last week? Because the online website and the online persona were not consistent. They reached out to me and asked some questions, and I started going back and forth and going, something feels disconnected. And it wasn't that there was a moment I thought, I think this is a bot. And then I realized, no, it's not a bot. There's a disconnect here in something. And I was trying to get to the heart of it. And I finally told him, look, you broke trust with me the moment this conversation started, because your digital footprint does not match this messenger conversation we're having. Like, something is not right. And I don't know what it is, but I'm done here. So I think that, I mean, for me, it's like in the last week that happened. And that's such an important thing, especially for those of us who are running small teams or teams of, I tend to serve people that have teams of 20 or less. So sometimes roles aren't quite as tightly described because the scope kind of flexes on job responsibilities. And so there's this sense of everybody's in everyone's business. And that's not 100% accurate, but it feels that way. And it's so important. What I hear you saying is you almost have to have a PR approach to your internal team, just like you do to your external team. That there is, I mean, yes, the top people in the organization are probably going to have more knowledge, but at the end of the day, you have to find a way to get your story into the hands of the people who are going to carry it for you in your organization.
Yes. And they have to match in their values what the CEO says. The CEO may not be in business development. The CEO is running the company and maybe a
Mm,
visionary, uh, and if, or entrepreneur that started the company. But certainly it's important to realize that if the values of the
mm,
CEO do not parlay into the business development team, to the advertising, to the marketing, or you don't have any proof points in the new world where most people start there to figure out if the company is legit, if the consultant is legit. I can give you an example that I use almost every day because being in the industry, I get a lot of companies that are trying to sell me AI agents and with emails. And they say, "Dear Gal, I have this new machine, if you will, that will expedite your emails or will allow you to engage with more people." And I just stop and basically look at their
mm,
website. And 90% of these companies, if you hover over the email that it came from, is not a company URL. It's a made up URL or something that AI created to create a domain that is easier to manage. But if you're not sending stuff from your own
hmm
domain, and for cybersecurity reasons, we have to look before we click on something that says, "Hey, I sent you a proposal. Hey, I sent you a document to review in PDF." And somehow it passes the cybersecurity
Yep.
filters in your organization, your email. And lo and behold, you click on something and that becomes your reputation because it went to thousands of your
Mm,
customers or your best group that you want to communicate with. That's really kind of the issue is at hand. Authenticity has to come from both
I
sides.
love that.
And business development and growth is affected directly by how credible are you when you're
Mm,
sending that email that says, "I can do miracles for you." They may be able to do those miracles, but I can't judge it or trust it without looking at their email
mm,
address and making sure it's not a spoof. So cybersecurity also is a big element that you have to consider. But how do you communicate to eliminate the gatekeepers that typically are in charge of making sure that you're not getting
hmm
hacked or you're not spreading a virus to other people? That is also part of the Guardian trust system. How do you govern your data? How do you govern incoming and outgoing messages? You would think about how does that relate to branding? It relates to branding because the impact of a failure or the impact of doing it right costs money or makes money.
I love that. So, as we're kind of coming to a close here, I have two final questions. What is one myth about trust and credibility that you would love to see entrepreneurs stop buying into?
The first and foremost, which I tell everyone, is really don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype, which is the name of my book, but it really is what I tell people when it comes to I got bad reviews.
Mm,
I got PR problem. I got a branding problem, which is kind of what my company does, which is advertising, public relations, and digital marketing. And I say, there's no problem in the world that you can't solve, but you have to start by not taking it personally when you have a lot of negative reviews, because in some situations, they might be made up. They might be fake. They might have been produced by a competitor. And take inventory and then start the process of saying, am I delivering what I promised? Or was there a customer service person that was on the phone and said, what do you want? Or put you on hold for 25 minutes? We all experience those things. So the hype could be in the form of bad reputation creation, but at the end of the day, you have to
mm,
own it. And example, a company that comes out and says, we were wrong about our approach. And the latest example is actually Burger King. Burger King has just switched up their whole approach to advertising and commercials wherever you see them because they experienced a great
mm,
decline in sales because people said, it's not the quality that used
yep.
to be. So what did they do? They acknowledged it and in fact kind of switched the whole bucket, if you will, in a different way where they're saying, we know, we heard you. It wasn't as tasty. It wasn't as rich in proteins, whatever it may be in Burger King's world. And we want you to know that now you
Yep.
can test us. We'll give you free fries or whatever it may be. But being a person that acknowledges it and being vulnerable about what doesn't work allows you to flip it into making a promise that is believable. And if people really like your product or service, they will come back. So don't believe the hype is about, don't listen to negative people, but listen to what people are saying. And then if you see consistent patterns that are coming from customers, instead of basically saying, oh, shrugging it off, I don't really care what people say. You need to care. You need to listen. And most importantly, in the new digital footprint world, you don't have a choice. You just don't have that choice of ignoring it.
1,000 times, yes. I've got examples running through my mind, and yes, I see that. So as we close here, what is one final piece of advice that you would give to a business leader who's trying to stand out and just not sure where to go?
The first and foremost thing that create what we call authority leadership, which is a word you may not be associating with marketing, is the big thing right now. So as a CEO or a business owner, you want to create a brand for yourself and make sure that the brand connects to your business. And the best way to do it is to create authority leadership. What does that mean? You can create content that appears now in multiple places, on your website, in the magazine that covers your industry, on a website that talks about case studies and user scenarios. Whatever the industry you're in, it might be different. But especially in B2B, where you're talking about multi-million-dollar items that are being purchased over a period of decision of 6 to 9 months on average, you got to be providing proof points, not just about the product or the service or your company, that you are trustworthy. And the way to do it is to get your messages out in the channels where people are listening to what you have to say. And when I say listening, it's not necessarily with your ears. They might be in the form of visual confirmation, if you will, that you really need to get your message out. You can't hide anymore or say, my company and my personal brand should not mix. Think about Steve Jobs and Apple, Bill Gates and Microsoft, Amazon. You know who the owners are, even when they're like billions of dollars companies. You know there's a Bill Gates, that there is Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg. You know who they are, and it's not an accident. It's part of building a trusted brand.
I love it. I love it. Gal, you've helped me to see here that there is a connection of trust that's not just a marketing metric, that it actually is a leadership skill. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for businesses there. Thank you for this conversation today. For those who would like to know more about you, would like to check out some of your resources, where could they find that?
The best way, the most productive and easiest way to find me is just on LinkedIn. Search for Gal Borenstein, and you will find my profile, and reach out to connect. For the listeners of your podcast, I'll be offering a free consultation. If you basically go to the message after you connected and say, I was on the show, I listened to the show, and I have a question. We're happy to kind of spread the knowledge, because people don't necessarily attribute what they're doing to how other people are looking at it. So think about it as a second opinion doctor offer to your listeners, and I hope that they take advantage of it. And if you'd like to check us out, go to borensteingroup.com, which is kind of the compendium, if you will, of being 30 years in the branding business, and a lot of use cases, and you can make your own decision whether it's a good thing to know and engage with.
Well, thank you so much. That's been fantastic. I will put links to all of this for those listening into the show notes so that you can find those as well. Thank you for being a part of the Brand on the Rocks podcast. Thank you, listeners, for being a part of this conversation as we continue to dive into ways to connect our marketing to the real world reality that is out there. Until next time, blessings.